I'm Denise Barbarita. Welcome to the first installment of Meet the Makers for AES New York section. We're here in the mastering room with the founders of Ex Machina. Guys, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Dan. I do sales marketing support. So if you email or call, you're likely talking to me, as well as like a sales marketing trade. You see me at the trade shows. So.
I'm Dev. I'm one of the co-founders of the company. I guess I'm technically our CEO, but we all kind of have our fingers in a lot of pots. And I'm the cat for all things physics, acoustics, physical design of the loudspeakers.
Hey, I'm Dimitri, and I guess technically I'm the CDO, and I do a lot of math and try to make things not shoot smoke.
The most important guy in the room.
Oh, yeah.
By far. So, in our previous conversation, you mentioned how, as a company, you try to take a whole system approach. Could you give us some examples of what you mean by that, and what would you say is the most important takeaway in terms of what sets your speakers apart from the competition? In other words, what makes you special?
So when we say whole system approach, it's instead of leaning on, hey, we have this incredibly cool new technology for tweeters, for example, and that's our thing. We have this great tweeter. When we started with kind of a blank sheet of how we wanted to design the loudspeaker, we thought about what was going to be important and innovative in every component as how it was going to complement the rest of the loudspeaker system. So the speaker's kind of a little bit of a relay race. I think a good example is the way our DSP interacts with our coaxial design. So we have a really unique approach to digital signal processing for impulse response correction. It's not like any other method out there. It's completely proprietary to us. Our third founder, Will, who's sadly out sick today, designed and wrote this from scratch. And it has an enormous number of benefits in terms of accuracy of impulse response. It doesn't create pre-ringing. It's lower latency. It's more accurate. But it's still an impulse response correction. So it is going to be able to do a lot of control for us in terms of the excursion behavior of the driver, in terms of the frequency response of the driver, but it's not going to really do anything to adjust the behavior of the coverage angle. Like the waveguide shape of that coax is the waveguide shape of that coax. It's going to throw energy how it acoustically and physically does. So when we were looking into designing these coaxials with the very advanced carbon composites we use, it's this material called Textream. It's a flat woven carbon fiber. We thought a lot about it in the context of, okay, what can we get this very advanced material to do that doesn't just make it look great on a piece of paper as if it were its own component, but that exactly picks up where the DSP left off and they can complement each other. And I think what that adds up to for our speakers and why you would want them is it's not just that they're extremely linear and accurate in a kind of technically measurable way. They are about as holographic sounding in terms of their image as anything you're going to hear. Like you can make a 5-degree pan move and you will hear it move exactly 5 degrees. If your phase relationships are good in your mix, your phantom center is going to be right in front of you. If your phase relationships are bad in your mix, it's no longer going to be the like, oh, let's flip it a bit and see whether or not the bass comes back in. It's going to be like, no, this phase relationship is wrong and this phase relationship is right. Move your microphone.
Yeah, and I think to the point of your kind of like question regarding the underlying philosophy and what it means to kind of be a kind of holistic thing. in a more, if I can be somewhat reductivist, you never get to design in a vacuum, right? So you don't go, oh, tweeter solved, and now you never have to think of it again. And now I can move to the mid-range, now I can move to the woofer, and then I can move to the crossover, and then I can stick this whole hodgepodge of things together. Like, no, in our opinion, good design is inherently iterative, dynamic, and recursive, right? So when you make one decision, to some extent or another, depending upon what it is, it will influence other decisions. And it's our job to figure out the what's, the when's, the why's, et cetera, in which each step is dynamically influencing the next step, which is dynamically influencing the previous step. So at some point in time, you kind of eventually kind of get down the entire structure, and you go, okay, I think we have something great here as a speaker, etc. And then you measure and you listen. And then you go back and go through, iterate, dynamic, recursive, and you go through all of the steps. There are obvious kind of like deterministic things, right? If you have a problem with your tweeter, it's a problem with your tweeter. But the way the tweeter, as per what Dev was saying, like, you know, the way the tweeter's interacting, for example, with the cone angle of the mid-range, which inherently forms the coax, is a great example of how these things can be dynamic and cause you to make iterative decisions and recursive problems or solutions.
Well,
yeah.
Certain point, even really before we got into the technicals, it was born out of experience. You know, the fact is Dev's an engineer. I've got an engineering background in terms of producing and mixing music. I've worked in music retail for longer than I care to admit. I'm very, very familiar with just about every loudspeaker that's been in the market for the last 20 years.
Yeah, you were my pusher for a really long time.
And the fact is, you know, there are some great loudspeakers out there. You know, there's some companies that are doing some really cool things, and you know, generally you can find great speakers, you know, more than just a single company doing it. Problem with most of them is that there's always trade-offs. Something like you were saying earlier about, you know, development and design. At some point, you start trading off things. So it's like you might have the call. I always like the companies will have their calling card, the one thing they do, and that they do really good, and then everything else is just like in support of that one thing is kind of feels like it's like good enough, you know. And our philosophy was we're making tools, not toys, you know. So we're making things that people to use. If they're going to spend their money on it, it needs to help them get to the end result faster. You know, it's like your job is to catch the baby as fast as you can. You know, and it's like the longer you're bogged down with making bad choices or, you know, over processing because you're fighting an inequity in your speaker playback, the more time you're wasting, the more time you're costing yourself. So, you know, at what point that was our point coming up with the speakers was like we need to make something that, well, Dev likes to say is like we made the speakers that we wanted because nobody else did.
You know? Good point. Could you give us a rundown of your product line?
Sure. So everything kind of follows the same core philosophy. It's all built around point source, highly constantly directive, so it's all 90 by 90 coverage angle. Everything is exactly flat phase. And then as you kind of go up, it just gets a little bit bigger, a little bit more bass extension, a little bit more volume. So our smallest loudspeaker is Titan, which is something we designed specifically for Atmos and for immersive applications. It's our only two-way and our only band-limited speaker. Then we have Ganymede, which is our dedicated near-field module. Then we have Pulsar, it's kind of our Goldilocks model, and that's the smallest one we make that has our flagship coaxial design, the same ones that are in our flagships behind us. Quasar, which is Pulsar but more. It's Pulsar with an extra sub and also in an axisymmetric hemispheric arrangement, so coax sub. And that helps a little bit in terms of the wavefront behavior when you're a little further out from them. And then lastly, Arcturus, which is behind us, and those are our mains. Like that's kind of our flagship, and they're great as the full 2.2 section of an Atmos system. They're great in a mastering context. I mix on them constantly. And then I'd say they're the only loudspeaker that we make that is in some way kind of categorically better than everything else beyond just volume extension. Especially the subwoofer designs in those are really unique and special. There's something we worked on with Seos for many years. They're a split ring radial magnet structure. So essentially, instead of having one permanent magnet, one voice coil, but then when you charge the electromagnet in the middle and it's pushing the cone forward, it's actually pushing it out of the magnetic field. In this case, we've designed something that creates a split magnetic field so that even at these very long excursions for that subwoofer, it's always staying in a constant motor strength. And as a result, they are maybe the lowest distortion subwoofers that I've ever heard or measured. Like the low end is not only really deep, it's extremely fast and clean.
And these are meant specifically to be soffitted, correct?
I definitely think they behave very nicely as soffits, but we do make freestanding versions as well. It's just the way the baffle's oriented. So if you need them for a soffitted application, we'll mill them for you with flat baffles so that they're flush to the plane of your soffit. will include radii for baffle transition if you want to freestand them.
Okay. And the Titans that you mentioned for Atmos playback, they are able to be integrated with any of your near field designs?
Yes. Everything has the same kind of core base electronics, like all of it's using a centralized DSP that we get made for us in Minnesota. So it's very advanced 5th generation Sharp chips, either 21565s or 569s depending. It's all really high-end discrete AKM converters, but every loudspeaker has the same processing pool available to it and gets the same kind of special DSP SAW supplied. So it all lines up exactly in terms of its delay, in terms of its impulse response. Everything has the same coverage angle. They're actually very easy to integrate in that regard in a full Atmos system.
You can use, with the Titans, you could also pair them with not,
I was gonna, that was my next question, yeah.
But we prefer.
Why would you? Okay, sure.
Why would you? Why would you?
But and Titan was something that we thought about a lot as a solution as Atmos specifically became more common and more popular. Okay, we need something that can be a remoted solution. We need something that can be flown from ceilings or rafters. Running power line up there is going to be a huge pain, but we still don't want to use passive crossovers for a whole bunch of reasons. Caps age, we want steeper crossover slopes, we want exactly corrected phase response. So what can we do with Anechoic that we can run over a 4-pole speakon in something that is small, is light, can mount on a standard like Visa pattern, that is going to still, for a surround application where maybe you don't need 30 hertz, but you do still want really fast impulse response. You do still want like the exact coverage angle that you want. You do still want everything else that is desirable about our loudspeakers. How can we bring that into a format that is very easy to set up?
If someone were designing a room and they said, hey guys, we want your speakers, we want an Atmos playback system, would you be part of that design process? Or
we certainly
no?
can be,
Yeah.
It'd be a case-by-case basis, but
Right, of course.
we're like there's never I'm not going to answer a question for somebody, you know what I mean? If they
Right.
ask, or ask for some advice, I'm always going to, and Dev and pretty much anybody here would do the same thing. So it's just on a case-by-case basis, we would help out if necessary.
And we've done like full projects like that before, where we've been involved. Sometimes it's just, hey, we want to do an Atmos system, help us configure the right choices in terms of the speakers, all the way up to we've done, all right, we'll do something from the ground up for the room design with you. We have the tools and the expertise to do it, and we're happy to get involved in projects like that. We have one project coming up where we're even going to do a fully bespoke surround design for it because there's specific bandwidth applications that this client wants. Since we make everything locally and we have access to our own mills, like we generally want to say yes if you want to do something cool.
What kind of feedback do you seem to get most often from mix engineers who are using your product? Like, is there something that you always hear? Is there something that always makes you happy to hear? Is there
no notes?
No notes.
No notes. My the guy who did the tape op review for the Quasars, I've known him for a very long time. I sent him a set to try out, and he didn't. We've been friends for long, so obviously we have that like sort of kind of like familiarity and jovial response. The first 2 words out of his mouth were not kind words, but they weren't meant to be unkind. He was just like, he was one of these people that would say, you would pry my Pro X from my cold dead hands. And he's like, I've tried so many other speakers, nothing's ever made me want to like get rid of my Pro X. And then I sent him these 2 weeks later, I call him, he's just like, F you. And he's just like, I've done 3 mixes on these in 2 weeks. He's like, the first time in 25 years, I've gotten no notes.
Wow.
And that's something that that's a common refrain from people I talk to, where it's like I mix faster, I make better decisions, I get no notes, happier clients, and it turns out when you can actually hear what you're doing, things go a lot easier in the studio. So
and that became the thing too, where for me when I was thinking about this, I'd gotten really tired of kind of mixing by jury. Like I didn't want to have to do the thing where it's like, okay, well I think I know how to compensate for what I think is not quite correct in these loudspeakers, but now we're going to take it out to like the kind of weird old missions that I have in the garage, and I'm going to play it in the car, and I'm going to try to triangulate a sense of how this is going to translate, you know, between the smarter people than me, like Dimitri, that we started this with. I was like, no, you shouldn't have to do this. You should be able to have a tool that is going to tell you what is happening, and if you listen to it and it sounds in the middle of it, like you've got it down the middle of correct for that system, it should have the breathing room to, when you bring it to a different setting, translate the way you expect it to. And I just think that's a more, it's not only faster, but it's also a much less creatively taxing way to make music, to, you know, make recordings, instead of trying to have to, you know, develop this triangulated guesswork. Just be like, no, this is going to tell me what I'm doing, and it's not going to be subtle about it.
But it's like, you know, make a compression choice because it's required, not because you want to necessarily, or you're doing it too much because you're not hearing. You know, it's like I joke. I used to wonder when I'd talk to mastering engineers, they'd be like, oh yeah, just a half dB EQ move is all that and it was necessary. And I'd go home and I'd be like messing around, like trying to like make a half dB EQ move. And I'm like, am I deaf? Like, I'm not hearing half dB. And then now with these speakers, like, oh, that's a lot. You know, half dB turns out is a lot of, you know, a big move. But, you know, when you don't have a speaker that tells you that information, you're flying blind. You have no idea.
Yeah, you know, I haven't recorded or mixed in a while, but I think the sentiment is probably true still, that kind of comfort in decision making and subsequent speed is invaluable. And I think being able to provide that is enormous, right? Like, can I trust what I'm doing? And if I can trust what I'm doing, I can keep doing things. I can move on. I can, you know, to whatever the next step may be in your process. And that's like a very valuable thing. You know, it takes time and mental energy to constantly check and recheck and et cetera. And I think we've kind of inculcated ourselves as operators and musicians and, you know, recording engineers to kind of play this relative game. So much so that we think it's actually good beyond a certain point, right? Like, but the only reason why it's good is because you couldn't trust your decision in the first place.
Yeah, it used to be that like it became part of the art of how you learned how to mix, that you were going to develop these convoluted series of educated guesses. And at some point we were like, but I don't want to make an educated guess. I want to make a choice.
Yeah, and it's like, I can't tell you how often I would go from speakers to headphones to the car. And then back and back and back. It's an enormous amount of time. It's an enormous amount of energy. It's annoying, especially if you've got, you know, deadlines, schedules, paying clients, etc. Like, they are tools. They're not toys. We enjoy them, as we all should. But, you know, I think that's a super important benefit to the accuracy and
it just makes the whole process less laborious.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it makes it fun. You know, again, like, you're not like going, is this right? Or having to like do all these other extra
it will
steps.
save you from the rabbit hole a lot.
Yes.
Right? It will save you from the like realizing you've soloed the kick drum for 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
Like, don't do that.
Been there.
So you're lessening all of our self-hatred.
Well, I mean, like, in a magical and perfect world too, it's like every hour you're spending on any one mix is an hour you're not billing for a different client. Like if I can get you from faders up to this is a mix I'm happy with in 2 hours instead of 6, you can bill 3 times as much.
Good point. On that note, I would say that this portion of our interview has been lovely and is over, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at the space. But thank you so much for introducing us and for inviting us here so we can learn more about what you do.
Sweet.
Yeah. Happy to have you. Thanks for coming.
So my name is Denise Barbarita, and we are here at Ex Machina Soundworks in lovely Brooklyn, New York. So Dev, can you tell us about the name?
Yeah, so it's from the Latin Deus Ex Machina, which means God out of the machine. It was a Roman morality play device, and it's actually pretty literal. At the end of these plays, what I wanted to tell you the moral of the story, they crank a figure of a Roman god down from a crane, hence God out of the machine. And when we were thinking about the name for the company when we started, we were like, well, we make the things that get your music out of the box, hence Ex Machina Soundworks.
There you go. Thank you for that explanation. So we're going to do a quick little tour, the whole kit and caboodle. So let's go this way.
So this space, when we started out with it, was a big empty warehouse that actually belonged to a tahini company before us. And almost everything you'll see in here is stuff we built. So inside here, this is our development lab space. This is where we do all of our 3D modeling work, all of our design work, all of our multi-physics models, and all of our small circuit testing. So
It's just a big brain room.
yeah, something like that. This side is sort of Shea Dimitri, hence all of the decade boxes and breadboards. And this side is where Will and I do a lot of the physics and the ML work. Then this is our main production area. So our loudspeaker cabinets are all made locally in Brooklyn. They're kind of life as they come in as the raw sheet material comes in as flat pack from Portugal. We use a very sustainable material called Valpromat that also has a lot of benefits in terms of its density and stiffness. It goes into the Brooklyn Navy Yards where it's milled into the panels we're going to make. It goes from there to our sort of sister space in Greenpoint where all of the handwork is done, all of the sanding, all the glue ups, all the finishing. And then all of the final sub-assembly is done here, like the drivers, the driver verification, all of the polyfill work, et cetera, ends here. And this is the good Mr. Willie. Willie's kind of our facilities maintenance manager, and he makes sure that the trains run on time.
Hello.
We'll continue on.
And you've been in this space how long?
We've had the space since 2019. Took us about 2 years to build it out, and we've been working out of here since 2020. One of the things we're most grateful to have, which is we have our own anechoic chamber. Oh, hi. This is Abby. Abby's kind of our senior production engineer. She is the last set of eyes and the last set of hands and the last stamp of approval on every loudspeaker that goes out. She also does a lot of the characterization work. So when we're working on new designs or new models, she's actually running a lot of like the measurement and gathering. And all of our process in terms of calibration, in terms of the unique DSP that's run for it, as well as all of our QC processes, thanks to the good Evan.
In your QC process, what happens when you find something is amiss?
Okay, so basically our checklist that we have is always evolving, right? When we develop and prototype, we have different checks that we look for, and there's an order to it, right? So at any point, if I see that it has failed one of those steps, I make a note of it, at what frequency I'm seeing it, and I can kind of hypothesize what I think it is. Then we take the speaker and we bring it back to main production. The guys in there will work with it and do their own tests based off of the information I gave them, and we start the process all over again. So when they will fix it or they'll tell me what they did to fix it, we'll bring it back in here. I will roll it in the anechoic chamber and I will begin the checklist again.
Excellent.
This is part of our measurement suite. So we use audio precision hardware and audio precision software. So this is an example of a polar plot. This is showing the directivity characteristic of a given loudspeaker in terms of its energy over angle. And all of that happens within the 555 series audio precision suite.
Quiet place.
Quiet place, yes.
So this room was, I think, maybe the most ambitious thing that we did here. Obviously, trying to make a real working anechoic chamber in New York City is tough. One of the hardest things was the coupling noise from the subways. So we actually have a little subroutine that lets us know what the schedule is if we're doing very deep level characterization. But the entire room here is floated and decoupled. We're standing right now on an 8-inch concrete slab that's on tuned 6-inch spring isolators. And then every other wall is wall within a wall on a wire tensioned lattice. So the room's extremely, extremely linear to about 80 hertz. It's pretty darn linear to about 40 hertz. And we have a full map of it, so we know where things aren't exactly right in the room and what spots of it, if we need to do deep level characterization, to avoid. And in best case scenario, the room we've characterized third party down to about -3 dBA.
Mm.
How long do you spend in here? Like at a
Ebony's
stretch.
the pro, and
Yeah.
Ebony sort of at this point I think is kind of immune to it. It
Yes.
really sort of depends a little bit person to person. I start to get a little squonked out after about 20 minutes.
My record's 30.
Yeah. Whereas BK Fox, the woman who did the mural on the front of our building, part of her deal with us was like, yes, I'll paint this, but you have to let me be alone in here for an hour. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Can she really sit in here for an hour?
She did it with all the
Yes.
lights off too.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And for her it was like meditative. It was, she really enjoyed it.
I've seen kind of everything. Some people really like the room. They find it relaxing, soothing. Other people get kind of, uncomfortable and skeeved out by it.
I'm somewhere in between
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
Somewhere in between. I think I could learn to love it.
Yeah.
I could learn to love it
Yeah.
for sure.
I think the thing that squonks people the most is, after a while, sometimes people think it's tinnitus or the like, but you'll start to hear this kind of high-pitched whine,
Mhm.
and that is actually the sound of your circulatory system.
Yes. The silence is very loud. Yeah.
I'm reminded of Hit Factory Studio 6, where if I would sit in there without listening to music for more than 10 or 15 minutes, my ears would start fluttering. So they managed to get it as quiet as this as well. No fans or anything in the room. Of course, equipment was in there. It was a much bigger room. But and I've been in a similar chamber in Japan before. It was a lot bigger though.
Yeah, and I mean, like, at some point, you're chasing a level that's kind of difficult to distinguish between, like, almost anything below about 20 dBA. It's hard by the naked ear to sort of tell the difference, but your microphone can tell. Like, your characterization, your vibrometry software can tell. So, chasing this level of a noise floor definitely was a challenge.
I bet.
Well done.
Absolutely. I could actually stay in here a little longer.
It's nice, right?
It is.
It's kind of chill.
It is.
Well, especially living in New York City where you get bombarded by noise constantly, it's a little bit of a respite.
It's just weird to hear a voice with no reflections.
It'll be
Mhm.
especially
Yeah,
weird
it is.
once you walk back
Like, where's the-
outside.
Yeah. It's
And it's wild when you walk back into an untreated room after that. It's going to sound like the craziest, echoiest thing you've ever heard.
Oh boy. That's right.
Wow.
Yeah, now suddenly something you wouldn't have noticed before. Now you hear how it sounds so slappy in here.
Huh.
And you'll acclimate again pretty quick. But it's the contrast. Your brain's a giant contrast engine.
It's unreal though. It's so cool. Like if people could just hear stuff that way, they'd be like, that's what like this sounds like. Or
Yeah, and we will occasionally actually even set up loudspeakers in there, which is, it's a weird experience, but it's really cool.
It is a weird experience. Like he did that to me the other day. We were like testing something out. He's like, "Here, listen to him." I'm like, "Okay." I felt like I needed to turn it up more because that sort of like really like kind of deadness made me feel a little less like I don't know. I guess there's something to.
Well, you're getting no reflected energy
Right, that's
whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah.
it's the impulse of the loudspeaker and nothing else.
So generally speaking, when you set up a single Arcturus,
Yeah, Arcturus would be our largest
when
loudspeaker.
you do that and you stand directly behind it, how much do you hear, like comparatively speaking to within whatever the normal width field of this one speaker is?
So all of our loudspeakers are designed for a 90 by 90 coverage angle. You will have directly behind the loudspeaker by intention, it's only what escapes the baffle crawl, so there's going to be no high end really behind the loudspeaker. But because they're all point source loudspeakers and they're all exactly phase integral, you can stand very, very close to them and they will still cohere. You can be a foot away from them, spread very, very wide, and your phantom center will still be right there. It's only once you pass the plane of the loudspeaker and start to go behind them that the phantom center collapses. And that is by choice, that's by design. We want to try to minimize problematic reflections as much as possible and give you energy shaded where you're going to be. So a very generous sweet spot, but not creating room reflection problems that you don't necessarily need.
And one other question, which we'll find out when we do the listening, if I were to stand directly next to the left channel on the outside, and it was a proper stereo recording playing back, something that has some stereo
You'll hear the right.
information. And can you clearly define the right-hand channel when you're by the left?
Yeah, you can
left-hand channel?
you can walk
By the
almost
right?
anywhere you want to in the room. You will not really hear the center image collapse as long as you're in the front field of the loudspeaker. I think that's one of the things that's the most valuable about our approach to loudspeaker design is that phantom center stays where it is.
You don't lose any amplitude like from being off like to one side. You're still
You can
gonna get-
differentiate the channel
Yeah.
information. Cool.
And is that in part because of the electronics in the speakers, or it's like the shape of the drivers and the tweeters and stuff?
It's kind of the sum of all the parts of the system.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of it is the behavior of the coaxial design and the way that we've designed the waveguide. And this is sort of often a trade-off you have to make with a coaxial, where getting the cone shape to behave nicely as a driver for stiffness is not the same shape as it wants to be a nice waveguide for the tweeter.
Mhm.
Or sometimes you'll see on a kind of more traditional older coaxial design, you'll see like a horn that's offset or a surround with the lip on the edge that's kind of over, and that will reflect energy back in and kind of create a raggedy response on axis. Part of why we put in the effort and the time to use these incredibly space-age materials is so we could have our cake and eat it too, basically, so that we can get the shape of that mid-range to be an almost perfect waveguide geometry and still have the mid-range behave as a piston over 2 octaves past the frequency range it's in. And then some of that's the digital signal processing and the unique approach that we have to impulse response correction, which is something we actually coded and wrote from scratch. It's not based on any other mathematical process. And by taking the benefits that you get acoustically from the way the drivers are designed, the way the cabinets are designed, and then combining them with sort of the anchor of the relay race of what we can control in digital signal processing is why we're able to get the imaging in the phantom center and the coherence that we get.
Cool.
I mean, hearing all this, I am asking myself, how long did it take to get this down to a science? Given that you have materials coming from other places and measurements need to be so exact, how?
We started researching this 3-something years before we made our first anything, and it's been a continual evolving process since then. We try not to rest on our laurels. Let's say to get the sauce to where it is now, where everything works in harmony the way that we like it, took 3 years to kind of get the good foundation and maybe 5 to get it really dialed.
I mean,
It took 27 iterations of the tweeter dome, trying different layups and as far as just like weaving before we were like, that's the one that we like, and it turned out to be that was also the one that measured it.
I mean, I'm also thinking about the fact that we've all gone through COVID now. Were there problems at all during that time in terms of getting your product to market, as well as getting, the components that you need in order to even make anything?
Well, we debuted at NAMM 2020. Like we all, Dev, Will, and I went out there. We had a booth set up. Speakers were there for people to listen to. Had a lot of meetings with a lot of dealers, a lot of people talking. And they're like, "Well, so when are you guys planning? When are these going to be available to purchase?" And we're like, "March."
Great.
So March came and the lockdowns and
that went poorly.
yes, we really weren't able to get anything out the door until much later that year, even when things started opening back up, because then it was only one person at a time kind of being in the old space, just stay, social distancing and all that. What we were talking about earlier, we took the chance and had sort of the foresight to say, yeah, this is going to become a problem, because there was already, by the time the lockdown sort of like ended, there was already, you could already see the beginnings of what later became like the supply chain shocks happening all over the place. And we were just like, okay, like let's just bite the bullet and get anything that we need to, in like volume, so that we don't run into the problem of, oh, it's going to take us 6 months to get you a set of speakers.
Yeah, with a lot of them, like you just couldn't buy parts in small quantities. Like it's like, we will sell you 2,000 of these, or we will sell you none, and these are your only options. So we just
did it.
Yeah. Well, where should we move to next?
Well, I can give you sort of the last little bit of the fun spaces in our little green space and garden, or we can go straight to our demo room.
We still have a minute to walk around. I think we should complete a tour.
All right, let's go.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the word on the street is you guys have some espresso that is
We do work
top of the line.
So we're very good friends with Paolo PC at Regalia Coffee, who has helped us source our own greens and roast our own house coffee. So we have one right now that's Colombian Corozo Imperial. It's super cool. Tastes like blue cheese and marshmallows. And we always have little baggies of it for people who come visit. You get always no coffee.
Blue cheese.
So this is our kind of lounge space, green space. We'll take staff meetings up here, and obviously it's a lunchroom a little bit for everybody, but it's also something to have a, a little bit of a more relaxing connection to nature. We wanted to make sure the space had a lot of green life. It just sort of makes you feel a little bit better when you're working inside all day. And we're all big coffee nerds. Got the decent espresso machine, got the fancy fellow Eden. So we have a little rooftop garden. Yeah, especially in the summer, it's it's a nice little break from things. My mom's retired now and is a very avid gardener, so she helps us kind of plant good perennials and make sure we consider like the local ecology.
I love that. Now, did you guys design this room yourselves, or did you have somebody come in, a contractor come in to help you?
This is a combination of a couple of different things. So this started as a ready Naira room. It's kind of a very cool process for predictive modeling for non-cuboid spaces. So it's a ready model at its base in terms of the pitch and the angle of the room and a lot of the specific tune treatments. We built off of that model as a starting point through a combination of the actual construction tolerances and a learning process. Kind of weren't totally satisfied with it. And so we, over time, redid, remodeled until eventually a lot of the pieces that are in here were processes that we came up with ourselves, like our soffit wall installation, most of the critical angles. We eventually hit a point where we're like, we're just not going to get the precision that we want from a GC and a tape measure, so we actually precision milled almost all this ourselves.
Great.
With the exception of the big RPG acoustics diffusers in the back and the bad panels here.